IB Nation. Welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Friday. It is Friday, February 14th. So that means a couple of things, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the Friday free-for-all mailbag. It is also Valentine's Day.
Yes.
So happy Valentine's
Day, everybody.
Absolutely. It is Valentine's Day. But more importantly, at least to me, more importantly, Notre Dame made a big hire that was announced here in the last 24 hours. They have now found their new general manager, and they found that gentleman in Mike Martin, who's coming over from the Detroit Lions. So what we're going to do today, folks, is we are going to talk through the Mike Martin hire, and we're going to dive into what it means for Notre Dame and what Marcus Freeman has been doing. And then, of course, it's Friday. We have our Friday free-for-all mailbag. So be sure to submit your questions in the chat. We're going to answer as many of them as we can. All super chats get bumped up to the top. So if you want your question answered right away, you can go ahead and submit a super chat. This is not just for premium board members. This is for anybody that listens to the show on a regular basis. So right now there's 165 people in the chat. All 165 of you listening can submit a question if you guys have something that's came up over the last couple days. But I'm ready to get rolling. Brian, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Man. It was kind of funny. I woke up this morning and I got text messages from somebody saying, hey, just so you know, Mike Martin's going to be the guy. And then of course, the sequence was I got those texts. Then Adam Schefter tweeted it out. Then there was just all this. And I'm like, oh, well, this is what I get for sleeping until 8:30 with all this news going on. But it's a big move, Trev. And we're going to talk about Mike Martin. Obviously, this is a big enough story to kind of kick things off before we get into the mailbag. But I think first and foremost, before we talk about Mike Martin specifically, what this move shows, what this specific hire shows, and some of the intel that we heard about yesterday, I put a post on the message board, an intel piece on the message board yesterday saying that, hey, listen, I'm hearing that Marcus, well, first of all, I was told that nothing was imminent. That didn't turn out to be quite so accurate. And I don't know that they expected Mike Martin to make the decision this quickly. I think it's kind of part of it. Like they kind of it was Wednesdays when they had him in for like the day-long interview and went through all that. And I think they were expecting a little bit more of a let's see what he thinks and all that. But he took the job pretty quickly. I mean, he accepted the job, I believe, yesterday. But what I was told is they're going to go a little bit of a different route, and they're going to do what we had talked about, Trev, we thought would be the best thing for Marcus Freeman to do. And it sounds like Marcus Freeman sees that has a vision of kind of where he wants to take this. And it's with an eye on looking at how things are evolving as opposed to how things have been. And what I mean by that is the intel piece that we put up yesterday was revolving around, we don't think it's just going to be one guy that does all encompassing. He's not going to replace Chad Bowden with another Chad Bowden. And it looked like that was the direction he was going to go when he was going to hire James Blanchard, which was fine. I mean, James Blanchard's a dynamic guy and very talented, and I understood that particular move. But once that fell through, this is the direction that he went. And it is a hiring a GM. We were told, my intel piece also said that I think they're looking in NFL circles. There's a few names that I was given of potential guys. And then, of course, this breaks this quickly with Mike Martin coming from the Lions. But they're also then going to make another hire of someone who's going to focus just on recruiting and primarily high school recruiting, which I think is really smart. And the reason that I think this is such a savvy move by Marcus Freeman is what we're seeing with a lot of these guys is that the GMs are guys who are just the recruiters, and it's their job to go recruit. And of course, Mike Martin is going to have a big role in recruiting from an evaluation standpoint, from a putting the board together standpoint. But what I think this hire is going to do, and then with what we're hearing in regard to him also making another big hire, and I've actually heard a couple things. Obviously, the Kenyatta Watson information was out there yesterday. That's a name we heard. Way too early to be talking about like it's a done deal there. There's other people on the board, but there's other people that we're hearing from that are getting interviewed for other roles in the recruiting operation. So he's looking to continue building up the recruiting side of things in a way that's not just this GM and his 4 or 5 little sidekicks are doing all the recruiting, that there's going to be a recruiting operation. There's going to be the portal. There's going to be player personnel. And then over top of it's going to be the general manager who's going to have a big say in obviously who they go get. And then it's kind of up to the recruiting staff along with Mike Martin to then go get the players. And so I think that there will be some day-to-day recruiting involved, but I don't think he's going to be Chad Bowden where he has his hands in every single recruitment that Notre Dame is after. I think they're making this a much bigger position than that. And to where it's like he's got to oversee who are we going getting in the portal? What are our roster needs? What are our number needs? Obviously making sure the NIL department's kind of its own thing, but making sure that there's great collaboration and communication with the NIL department. And the way that the landscape of college football is shifting, it's almost impossible for someone to be a day-to-day recruiting grinder and handle all of this. And I think that was a bit of the struggle that Chad Bowden had this past year, was trying to juggle all of that. And Marcus Freeman saying that, look, yes, we could hire a guy to do all that, but wouldn't it be more efficient and effective to kind of put him in this role and then expand the staff over here and have someone that kind of does a lot of the, here's the list, let's go get them kind of thing. And that's what it sounds like from some sources that I'm hearing. And I don't have the direct, I haven't been told this directly that this is how it's going to go. I should have made that clear before I started that explanation. But this is me reading between the lines of things that I've been told about how it's going to go. I should have said very clearly, hey, this is how I think it's going to go. But this is my opinion of how I think it's going to go, not what I'm told. I've been told they're going to do this and they're going to do this, and then some other things about just this is what we're going to do, but not this is why. This is me reading between the lines of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if I'm correct on this, and I think that I am, this is a great move because you have some, obviously Marcus Freeman still top of the he's the one hiring the GM. It's not like NFL where the GM gets hired and then he hires the coach. This is Marcus Freeman saying, hey, this is who I want to go get. Obviously working with Pete Bavacqua and other people in that role. He's still the head honcho of this, and it's his vision that the GM now has to go carry out. And I think this is this operation. Put Mike Martin aside for a second. We'll talk about him specifically, but I think this is a tremendous view of it, because if you really think about how the NFL works, talent acquisition is done in two ways. It's free agency and the draft. Now, college football is a little different from the NFL in that free agency and the draft are done two different ways, and they're done in with the draft you kind of take whoever you want when your spot comes up, whereas in free agency it's about negotiation and recruitment. Both aspects of college are like free agency, but there's the evaluation piece that's so much like the draft. But there's two different ways to acquire talent. You need a staff that is involved in this one, and you need a staff that's involved in this one. When you look at NFL scouting departments, you have college scouts, you have national scouts, you have regional scouts, you have scouts that scout other teams in the NFL for potential free agents. You have all types of different things, and you need that in college as well. You can't just have Chad Bowden and his staff of 6-7 people doing all the high school recruiting and the rising senior, rising junior, rising sophomore, and rising freshman classes now, and also have them being responsible for scouring the entire nation for players that are going to be coming through the portal. It's too much for a small group. Now you have him, Mike Martin at the top. You have Matt Jensen and the role that he plays with kind of player personnel who came over last year. Then you have the recruiting operation that focuses more on high school. There's going to be a focus on transfer, but somebody's got to be over top of it, making sure that the roster is being put together with Marcus Freeman's vision, with obviously Marcus Freeman still playing a very key role in the actual recruiting, but now it's others kind of being involved, having a big role in sort of carrying out Marcus Freeman's vision on a day-to-day basis. And it's so much different than it was 3 years ago when he first got hired, where it was my vision is high school recruiting, little bit the portal. Now it's just such a bigger operation now. And if Marcus Freeman's doing what I think he's doing, I think it's exceptional. And this will be the model that more and more people start to follow, where the last couple of years we've seen a lot of GMs that are like James Blanchard, like Chad Bowden, which has been great. That's what was needed then. But I think Marcus Freeman's kind of looking into the future, and the future's kind of arriving really quickly and saying this is how it's got to be now. And this move of Mike Martin says that that's how he sees it. And I think he's spot on, Trevor. He's absolutely spot on. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited about this direction. You and I talked about this when Chad left, that we felt this would be, this is something he should consider. And it sounds like he's considering it. And honestly, with some of the names that I was told early on that he was looking at, I think this was kind of where he was leaning towards. It's just that he felt James Blanchard was so good that he was willing to kind of go that route for him. But James Blanchard's the only person that I heard at all of the names I was given that would serve the role the way that James Blanchard was probably going to serve that role. Everything else I heard is more of this. And so I think this is ultimately the direction Marcus Freeman wants to go. And when you look at a situation where things don't always go to plan, and obviously Chad leaves, that's not the timing wasn't great. It's not, Chad's been with Marcus Freeman since they were at Cincinnati together. They've been a great pair together. And then you move forward to what they did at Notre Dame together, and Chad takes the USC job. Unfortunate situation. It's a bummer. Chad did a phenomenal job at Notre Dame. And then you set out to replace him with somebody that we all think is going to be a home run hire. And we think a deal's about basically done. Some tragic things happen. Doesn't work out. So then what do? You rally. And now getting specific about Mike Martin, combined with what we see the role turning into, I think Marcus Freeman hit an absolute home run. And this is the mark of a coach that you'd expect to have a lot more experience than Marcus Freeman doing this thing. But for him to do it in year 3, going into year 4, to be able to bounce back, I mean, it's unfortunate as heck to lose a guy like Dylan McCullough. Phenomenal coach, phenomenal recruiter, phenomenal mentor. And then you replace him with about as good of a hire as you could imagine. Then you have Chad leaves, and then James Blanchard thing doesn't work out. And Marcus Freeman comes back, and in my opinion, and from everyone that I've talked to, and I'm still doing some more digging, but from everything I've heard so far, the direction he's going with just how the operation is going to work, combined with who he picked to do it, I think is an absolute home run hire, Trev. And we'll talk specifically about Mike Martin, because I know you've got a very strong opinion about him specifically. So I'll let you do that next, but I really wanted to lay the groundwork with just how smart I think this is to go this direction with an NFL guy running your recruiting, your talent. It's not even recruiting anymore. It's talent acquisition now. It's not just recruiting, because what it all inquires from an evaluation, from what are your needs? What do our coaches want? What fits our systems? What's our roster look like? All these other type of things. What's our financial situation? What can we pay? What can we not pay? And then being able to go out there and say, okay, here's what we want. These are the type of players we need. Let's go get them. And I just think that part of it is absolutely a home run. And to be able to adjust as quickly as he did to the James Blanchard thing, he went on vacation last week and comes back, and this is what he does when he gets back from vacation. I think it's a masterstroke by Marcus Freeman. I really do.
So let's talk a little bit about Mike Martin specifically here, Brian. And I love this hire. I really do. You and I were talking before the show about this. I've been writing, and I'm going to continue writing these articles, just previewing Notre Dame's opponents, way too early preview for the 2025 season. There's been a common thread. It used to be before, you see players enter the transfer portal. There's also this notion that the transfer portal is brand new. That's been a thing. That's been a thing for a very long time. It's just the height of it now is bigger than
the volume of it now is just insane.
Exactly. Yeah. But the transfer portal's always been around, and you would see players enter it. It's, maybe they're going into their junior or senior year. They might not have had the breakout that they were expecting yet. They're kind of working their way down the depth chart, not in the correct direction. So they enter the transfer portal. The newest trend now is, you're seeing guys who started and contributed enter the transfer portal, which I think is crazy. And so you go through, and you need now, on top of all the things that Brian listed out, you need roster maintenance. And that is a huge thing moving forward in college football. How do you continue to keep the players happy that are on your current roster? What does that look like? Brian, you brought it up in a couple of shows before this one, but I remember you talking about how Notre Dame sometimes feels like it has a reactive approach instead of a proactive
It always
approach.
has. For years, it's had a very reactive approach to things. Absolutely.
Which is why they needed somebody that has a background in being proactive with roster maintenance, which is why I love that Marcus Freeman turned to the NFL. Because you want to talk about proactive roster maintenance. You're talking about guys coming in, working their way off the practice squad onto the 3-deep depth chart, into keeping people happy with contracts, into keeping players around and satisfied with the amount of load management that they have. That's the NFL. And that's slowly what college football is turning into, whether we agree with it or not. That's just state
Because
of the union.
I don't like it. I don't like that it's turning in the NFL. I don't think you should have to re-recruit your team every year. I don't think that teams should just be able to every year go after the same guys over and over again. There's nothing binding them here. There's no any system of like consequences if people break rules. In the NFL, there's a system, and if you break the rules, you get punished harsh.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sue the NFL every time that you agree to a rule, but then you get busted for breaking that rule, and then you can just sue them because you're an idiot and you're going to lose. The system is incredibly broken. But even if it does, by God's grace, get fixed, this model is still going to exist because there will be a portal, there will be roster management, there will be high school recruiting. We're not going back to the way that it was. The portal is going to be a thing. It just needs to be done in a way where it's not the wild, wild west that it is now. So you are correct, Trevor. I hate the system that we have now, but even if it gets fixed, it's not going to look like it did for what we grew up on, which is just high school recruiting, occasionally going to get a transfer. It's not going to get back to that. So no matter how it gets fixed or doesn't get fixed, this is still the model that they're going towards moving forward. And I think Marcus Freeman sees that what's coming.
Absolutely. So what I love about Mike Martin big picture is kind of just what I love about the Lions organization in general. Dan Campbell has been very vocal and very open about how he doesn't put a whole lot of weight into the combine. The combine's cool. I mean, I live 10 minutes away from Lucas Oil. The combine's cool. It's cool to go see. It's cool to watch people run the 40-yard dash in person, do the bench press and the vertical jump and the wide receiver gauntlet. It's cool. But Dan Campbell puts a lot of emphasis into film. And he's challenged the staff with, hey, go out and find elite football players. Campbell's gone on record at press conferences and said things very similar to that. I don't know what it is verbatim, but it's all along the lines of, look, if you can perform well at a high level on the field, we put more value into that than you running a 4.49 40 than a 4.51 40. And that speaks volumes to me. And somebody like Mike Martin is enriched in that, and he's been surrounded by that during his time with Detroit. So it's no mystery to me that Detroit has had this turnaround that they have. Mike Martin has played a role in it, which is something that I think is really, really interesting. He has a good background. Brian, I know you put that intel piece on the premium message boards in the Champions Lounge, just going through and talking through his history and what kind of led him to this point. But for me, in general, big picture, I love this hire from Marcus Freeman.
Well, he was with he's been with, this was his fourth year with the Lions, correct? He's basically been there the entire time that the current administration is basically running things. We've seen the success they've had, especially through the draft. And to me, draft evaluation is the most important skill that I need to see from an NFL person. Like, I don't care about an NFL person that's great at free agency, because in free agency, you're usually kind of getting established players. Free agency is more of like the transfer portal, in that I know high school recruiting is kind of that way also, but the draft is still so much about evaluating projection from a level beneath ours to our current level. Where free agency in the NFL, the reason I say it's like the transfer portal, because you're looking at guys that are already established to some degree at your level. The projection of how do I think this wide receiver is going to fit in our system based on what he did with this NFL team to our NFL team is much easier to do than how do I think this second or third round wide receiver is going to translate into our system at this level of play. And that is the challenge. And that's what high school recruiting is that level of evaluating from a projection standpoint. Let's be real about this. It did not take rocket scientists. It did not take Notre Dame having the super savvy, wow, what great evaluators you are, to look at Riley Leonard and be like, yeah, that guy's really good. We need to get him. that doesn't take a lot of evaluation. It did take a better evaluation to look at CJ Carr as a sophomore and be like, I think that guy's going to be a stud, and go after him at that time, or to find a Joe Alt, which I think the Notre Dame staff. And this is one of the things that I always gave Jeff Quinn a ton of credit for. I pushed back on some people like, well, he just got lucky there. They missed out on some top. No, they didn't. They still had plenty of top targets on the board. They hadn't missed out on anybody. Jeff Quinn looked at Joe Walton, loved the evaluation, loved the talent, loved the genes. And even though he's a 3-star recruit, can kind of project. And I remember when he committed, I said to people at the time, like, this staff is excited about Joe Walton. They didn't get lucky. Some throwaway 3-star that they just brought in for depth turned into be a top 10 NFL draft pick. I don't know if they saw a top 5 NFL draft pick when they got Joe Alt, but they definitely thought he had a chance to be a really, really good offensive lineman. That's a different type of evaluation than if Josh Connerly was to have jumped in the portal from Oregon this year and be like, yeah, I think we should probably go get him because he's pretty good. It doesn't take a whole lot of evaluation.
Sure.
It doesn't. It takes more evaluation to find that sophomore offensive lineman that's currently 250 pounds at 6'6", and like Matty Augustine, and say, I see frame, I see this, I see that. Let's get on this kid. And then the level of, you've got your first-round draft picks, which are going to play a big role in how successful you are, but can you find those 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round gems? That's the other thing that makes the draft sort of comparable to high school recruiting, because not every, like Mike Mickens going and finding a Leonard Moore is like finding some gem in the 4th round that becomes an all-pro. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what that is. That's what a guy like Joe Alt is you go out and 4th or 5th round, draft a guy like Joe Alt, and you see the evaluation, and then he becomes an all-pro, a 10-year all-pro. Yeah, it's easy for you to look at Quentin Nelson coming out of college and be like, I think he's going to be really good. But what about the team that finds that 3rd or 4th rounder that they go draft or they trade up for? He becomes an all-pro. You need all of it. You need to hit on your first rounders and your second rounders. You need to hit on your day 3 guys also. Sometimes it's for a starting role. Sometimes it's for a, hey, we need good special teams. We need good depth here. This guy's more of just a pure nickel, and he can only play this particular role, but it's an important role. That's what high school recruiting is. And that's where the NFL thing translates. One of the pushbacks I've seen from people is, well, he doesn't have any experience high school recruiting. I don't care. Developing relationships with high school coaches is one of the easier things you can do. The most challenging thing when it comes to recruiting is, can you evaluate if you've got people skills, if you're organized, and if you're a hard worker, you'll be able to do the day-to-day recruiting aspect of it. And you'll be good at that. That's why you see young people jump into – I mean, I became a good recruiter my first full year recruiting, and I was a recruiting coordinator by my 3rd full year of coaching. Because if you've got the chops, you've got the chops. The challenge is, but can you evaluate? Can you sell the vision? Can you convince kids of the path to their eventual, they're reaching their goals? That's the challenge. Getting to know high school coaches and calling kids and camps and schmoozing and all that, that's not the hard part. Building relationships is important. And there will be some structural things that will be unique that he'll have to learn. But the things that matter most are how to put a roster together with restrictions. And there's a lot more restrictions now on putting a roster together because of the roster limits they're going to start doing. But then also, how do you put a roster together from top to bottom with the right kind of people, with the right kind of players to say, we're trying to go out and compete for a championship. And that's where I think NFL scouting and personnel has a lot more similarities to high school recruiting now than maybe it did 10 years ago. And that's the part about this I like, is can you evaluate? Yes, it's easy for me to look at certain players and be like, yeah, Jeremiah Smith, he's a stud. It takes no good evaluation to do that. I could have my wife, pop on some film like, hey, Ange, do you think this guy can play? And she knows enough about wide receiver play since she was married to me and I was a coach, coach receivers for 2 years of our marriage. And she goes to every Notre Dame game and takes photos. She knows what a good athlete a receiver looks like. She was an athlete in high school. She played soccer. She can look at Jeremiah Smith and be like, yeah, that's a dude. But can you go find that kid that nobody's really recruiting that hard, the Leonard Moore types, the guys like that, and say, hey, I think that guy is going to be a dude for me. and then find that guy. And you got to do both. But at Notre Dame, you have to be especially good at finding the Leonard Moore types, at finding the Riley Mills types, at finding those guys, the Bubakars, maybe the guys that aren't big-time prospects that you go out and get because you see that if this guy, hey, this guy may not be a 5-star day one, but we see the talent that once we coach this guy up by year 2, year 3, year 4, he could potentially be a star. Or, hey, we think this guy could be a great depth player for us. All of that's part of putting a class together. And that's why I tell people obsessing over recruiting rankings doesn't do you any good because it's about building a roster, not a class of, guys that you put together because of points. Like A&M, I said it at the time. I said that A&M class will not be as good as people think it is. Number one, you signed 8 defensive linemen. They're not all going to stay. Number 2, your entire class was built around your D-line and your receivers. Where was everything else? That's why A&M's had to go to the portal to basically build their entire secondary the last 2 years because they didn't do a very good job of recruiting the way that they needed to. And that's what gets you in trouble. And so there's a level of roster building that is now much more similar, especially at Notre Dame, to the way that the NFL works, Trev. And that's where I think that day-to-day recruiting thing, I don't care about that. That can be learned in 5 minutes. You've got to have a plan. You've got to be organized. You've got to be intelligent. But you got to be a great evaluator. And you've got to understand how to properly build a roster, not build a recruiting class. They're two different things because your recruiting class is geared towards building your roster. I don't care where your recruiting class ranks. It's how does it impact the roster? And that's what matters. And I think Notre Dame needs that, especially because of some of the restrictions that they do have. But that's why I think this move is just really, really savvy. To your point, Trev, I don't follow the NFL, but I grew up watching the NFL my entire life. And I know how, wow, the Lions are really good now. That's interesting. That's kind of all you need to know. Like this guy played a key role in the Lions becoming one of the best teams in the NFL. That's almost like all I need to hear. You know what I mean about this guy's ability to evaluate talent. But he's also with the Texans for a while when the Texans were really good and played a key role there. So I think this is a very strong hire, Trev, and I just love the direction that it goes. But I just don't think the day-to-day recruiting experience matters a whole lot to me because that's one of the easiest things to learn if you have all the other traits. And from what we hear, he has those traits.
I love this hire, and I think it's a great move by Marcus Freeman. I love that he played defensive back at Vanderbilt, so he has that background. He helped He played an integral role in multiple different organizations, having good stretches of really good success in the NFL, which holds a lot of weight for me when you start talking about where Notre Dame is at. Had a lot of conversations around Notre Dame being on the cusp of getting over that hump, and I think that Mike Martin can play a huge role in that as well. Brian, any final thoughts on the new GM Mike Martin before we move on to the mailbag?
No, I like the fact that Marcus Freeman is thinking outside the box of what traditional roles have been. I like the fact that he's kind of shooting for the stars a little bit. You know, I've heard a lot of different things. You should hire this alum, that alum. I don't think he was as concerned about that. If an alum was the right fit, I think he would have hired him. But he cares more about the right fit. But I just think it says a lot about your ability as a coach that you can take a circumstance that's unfortunate or it's a bummer or could be a hindrance to your program and you turn it into something that's like strong. And again, we've talked about the D coordinator hire. Hopefully he's right about that one. But the two moves he's made since then, very unfortunate to lose Dylan McCullough. You hit a home run to replace him. Unfortunate to lose Chad Bowden. That gets compounded by the unfortunate circumstances that happened with James Blanchard that kept him from coming. So what do? This is how you rebound? This is how you rebound Marcus Freeman? Really? Okay. Well done. Well done, my man. So I just think that just shows a lot of his skills as a coach and also living out what you preach to your players. Hey, stuff is going to happen. Adversity is going to happen. Hey, I lost Dylan McCullough, so I can be all upset and do, or I can just go out there and, hey, man, I wish you the best. I love you. I understand what you got to do, and now I got to go do what I got to do and go get somebody to replace you that's just as good or hopefully better. I mean, that's your goal. That's your task, right? And then you have these things happen with Chad leaving and then the James Blanchard thing. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to go out there and just nail this next one. That's what he's tasked to do. But he's really nailing it, in my opinion. Now, again, I don't know that this is going to be a hire that works out. We don't ever know that. I don't care how proven somebody is. You don't know how they're going to work out at this job. We've seen coaches go from one place to another and not be able to translate the success they had at one place to the other. We've seen players go from one school to another and not translate the success they had at one school. It's the same thing with jobs like that. So we don't know that it's going to be a home run. All I can do is evaluate the things that we do know. And going into this, it appears that this is the kind of move that, if it works out, is an absolute home run hire and could have major ramifications. Because honestly, I don't know this. I don't know Marcus Freeman like that well. Like, we've never hung out. We've never, like, had long, conversations about how's the wife and kids. We've never had, I don't know him like that. I know him professionally, but I know him from the standpoint of studying him and being around him and watching him. And as a coach, watching another coach, seeing certain things with him. And if Marcus Freeman is who I think he is, based on what I do know of him, what I have learned from him, what I have observed from him, I think that the run they went on this year changed him from the standpoint of the future is still in mind. You can't be completely short-sighted, but he got a taste of something this year that I think he's like, I want that again. You ever had a new food, Trevor, and you're like, oh my gosh, how have I been able to survive life all these years without having this? And now that I've had it, it's the most glorious thing in the world, and I want it more, and I want it more, and I want it more. And I think that's what happened to Marcus Freeman this offseason, based on what I'm seeing, what I know of him, a couple things that I'm hearing. I think he got a taste of what could be at Notre Dame, and everything he thought Notre Dame could be got validated to some degree, and now he's like, we're freaking going for this thing. And that's what these moves say to me is, no. 14-2 and runner-up isn't good enough. I want the whole freaking thing. And doesn't like he's not happy. Hey, we had a great year, 14-2. I think he believes his team had a great year, and I think he's happy as all get out that his team made the run they did, and he's happy for the kids. But as a competitor on the inside, this is, we're going to get there now. And I think that's what these moves say to me. When I just some of these other things we're hearing that he may get this guy for recruiting, and I got a call yesterday from somebody who's like, hey, I heard that he's talking to this guy about bringing him on staff and some kind of recruiting. I'm like, good Lord, this guy is. And by the way, some of these conversations that I'm hearing about are well, that if that happened when you say it happened, that meant the dude was doing it on his vacation. You know what I mean? So it's like, this guy's hungry, and I think you see that with the things that we're seeing from him right now.
To your point, Brian, last thing that I'll say, which I think is a fantastic point. I learned everything that I needed to know about Marcus Freeman, fulfilling all the things that you're talking about. When after they lost the national championship game, he kind of hung around in the tunnel and started watching a little bit of the ceremony. There's some people that interpreted that a certain way. To me, that's became like a popular thing to do. Like, you see like the players do it, stand on the field, like get the picture for an Instagram post or a Twitter post or something where it's, we'll be back. All fair. I understand that. Marcus Freeman, for my concerns of him being and becoming a celebrity, which those concerns are still there, but for him to do it in an area that wasn't spotlighted, for him to stand off to the side and look at it and say, all right, that's something that I want, you can tell. And if all the things that you're hearing are true as well, that just leaves so much more room for excitement. And that's something that I think is going to be absolutely huge moving forward. But, Brian, that's going to do it for our recap of the Mike Martin hire. It's a fantastic hire. I think it's going to mean a lot for Notre Dame's program moving forward. To your point, no hire is a for sure thing, but I think they're really trending in the right direction with this one.
You mean no hire is a sure thing as far as how it's going to work out?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Because I just want to make sure this is a done deal. This isn't
Yeah.
Okay. Just we're same page. Just that's what I thought you meant. But I just wanted to be
Totally.
sure for
Yeah.
clarification purposes.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, guys, we're about to jump into the Friday free for all mailbag. But before we get there, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. And whichever platform you watch us on, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. And the best way to support what we do here, all the things that we're talking about, all the things that we're going to talk about today with the questions coming in the mailbag, are already conversations going on the premium message boards in the Champions Lounge at boards.irishbreakdown.com.